November 19, 2012. A 22-year-old woman is stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint in San Clemente, California, less than 60 miles from Los Angeles. She's quiet, she doesn't say much. She's holding a newborn baby in her arms, the agents run her fingerprints, and the system lights up red. Her student visa? Revoked months earlier. Her reason for being in the United States? She won't say. But what those agents are about to find out is that this young woman isn't just any illegal border crosser. She is the identified partner of one of the most feared men on the planet, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most powerful drug lord in the history of the Western Hemisphere. Her name is Zulema Aracely Lindoro Navidad. And if you think you know her story, you don't. Because what she's been living through, the betrayals, the disappearances, the affairs, the arrests of her own father and brother, the kidnapping of the man she married, and the daily reality of loving the most wanted cartel boss in Mexico, makes the narco drama you see in series look like a telenovela for kids. Stay with me, because this one is wild from start to finish. Now, before we get into who Zulema really is, we need to understand the world she was born into. Because this is not a story about a regular woman who fell in love with a dangerous man. This is a story about a girl who was already in the game before she even knew what the game was. Sinaloa, Mexico. The Golden Triangle. This is the birthplace of the most sophisticated drug trafficking organization in the world, the Sinaloa cartel, the organization that for decades controlled more drug routes into the United States than any rival. The organization that produced El Chapo, a man so powerful, so untouchable, that he escaped from 2 maximum security federal prisons in Mexico. The organization that, after El Chapo was finally extradited to the US, in 2017, passed the crown to his sons, the Chapitos. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar is the oldest of the Chapitos. The US government currently has a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. $10 million. That tells you everything you need to know about who this man is. And Zulema Aracely Lindoro? She's the woman identified by US federal authorities as his partner, the mother of at least 2 of his known children. The woman who bore the Lindoro name, a name that in the narco world of Sinaloa carries its own weight and its own danger. But here's what really went down. The story of Zulema isn't just about who she married, it's about where she came from. Because the Lindoro family? They've been in this world for a long, long time. Let's rewind, way back, to understand who the Lindoros really are. Badiraguato, Sinaloa. If you know anything about Mexican drug history, you know this name. Badiraguato is ground zero, the birthplace of El Chapo, the birthplace of some of the most feared cartel figures in Mexican history. It is a rugged, mountainous municipality where the Sierra Madre Occidental meets poppy fields and silence. It is the kind of place where the cartel isn't just an organization, it's a way of life, a culture, an inheritance passed from father to son, from uncle to nephew, from family to family. The Lindoro name has roots right in the middle of all of that. Now, to understand the weight that name carries, you gotta go back to a cartel figure known as El Teco Lindoro. Real name Juan Jose Lindoro Guerrero. El Teco wasn't a Sinaloa cartel soldier. He was something arguably more dangerous in that world. He was an independent operator, a narco who didn't owe allegiance to any single cartel, but had alliances with multiple organizations. He moved cocaine through Mexico for the Colombian Cali cartel. He negotiated deals that most traffickers never got close to, and in 1990, that independence almost got him killed. El Teco traveled to Cali, Colombia, to negotiate a major drug deal. While he was there, the Colombians grabbed him. They held him captive, demanding payment for a drug debt connected to his family, specifically his brother-in-law, who had been killed in an ambush in Culiacan. His brother-in-law had been carrying a Cali cartel shipment when he was hit. The drugs were lost. The Colombians wanted their money, or they wanted blood. The story of El Teco's kidnapping became so legendary in Sinaloa that Los Tucanes de Tijuana, one of the most famous narco corrido bands in Mexico, wrote an entire song about it. The song is called Cien por Uno, 100 to 1. It came out in the year 2000, a full decade after the incident. That is how long the story lived in the collective memory of the narco world. You don't get a corrido written about you unless your story matters. El Teco survived. He was saved, according to reports, partly through the intervention of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies, arguably the most powerful trafficker in Mexico in the 1990s. Amado reportedly helped broker a deal that canceled the debt in exchange for El Teco's continued cooperation moving product. That's the level of narco history attached to the Lindoro name. Now, fast forward to the family unit that Zulema was born into. Her father, Mario Lindoro Elanese, known by the alias El Nino, or Don Mario, is the patriarch of the modern Lindoro family. He's a 69-year-old Sinaloan with deep roots in the narco world, not through gunfights in the street, but through something far more valuable to a drug trafficking organization: financial logistics. Mario Lindoro Elanese was an operator, a man who moved resources, managed assets, and kept the machine running from the background. He stayed quiet, he stayed behind the scenes, and for a long time that kept him safe. Her mother, Flora Navidad, gave the Lindoro children their full last name, Lindoro Navidad. Zulema and her siblings grew up under both of those family names. The family is originally from Sinaloa, but by the time they come into focus in our story, they had expanded, moving through Culiacan, through Jalisco, and eventually into the high-end neighborhoods of Zapopan, one of the wealthiest municipalities in all of Mexico. Zulema was born in 1990. She grew up with at least 5 siblings: Olga Hereda, Lidia, Mario Alfredo, Victor Miguel, and Javier, who has since passed away. Each of those children would eventually play a role in what the Lindoro family became. But of all of them, Zulema's life would take the most scrutinized path, because Zulema would become the woman linked to Ivan Archivaldo. This is where it starts getting crazy. Now let's talk about the man Zulema ended up with. Because to understand what her life became, you need to understand exactly who Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar is. Ivan was born to El Chapo and his first wife, Maria Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez, sometime in the early 1980s. Authorities can't even agree on the exact date, which tells you something about how secretive this family was from the jump. Some records say October 2nd, 1980. Others say August 15th, 1983. What everyone agrees on is that from the time he was a teenager, El Chapo was grooming him. According to Insight Crime and former cartel insider Damaso Lopez Serrano, known as Mini Lick, El Chapo introduced his sons to the Sinaloa cartel during their teenage years. Ivan didn't start at the bottom. His father handed him product to move, gave him mentors within the organization, and treated him as a future leader from the start. El Chapo reportedly entrusted a certain amount of product to Ivan and his brother Jesus Alfredo early on, letting them learn the trade from the inside. But El Chapo wasn't raising soft boys, and Ivan didn't turn out soft. In December 2003, Ivan is out in Culiacan after a night at a club, casually street racing his BMW M3. The kind of thing a young man does when his last name is Guzman and nobody in the city is gonna stop him. Then in April 2004, things get real dark real fast. Multiple contemporary news reports allege that Ivan was involved in the murder of a 20-year-old Canadian exchange student named Kristen Dayel and her Mexican companion, Cesar Augusto Pulido Mendoza. Kristen was studying at a college in Calgary, Canada, and she was doing a student exchange program in Mexico. She and a friend went dancing at a nightclub called Bali Bar in Zapopan. That night, she allegedly encountered Ivan Archivaldo. Reports say she rejected his advances, and in the narco world, a man like Ivan wasn't used to hearing no. The case remains officially unsolved to this day. No one was ever convicted, but the allegations haunted Ivan's name from that point on. Then, in February 2005, Zapopan municipal police officers observe a man being thrown from a car. They pursue the vehicle, pull it over, and inside, sitting there, is Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar. He's arrested along with associates. El Chapo, desperate to get his son out, allegedly gave up his own ally, Alfredo Beltran Leyva, to the authorities in exchange for pulling strings for Ivan's release. Think about that. El Chapo reportedly burned one of his own top lieutenants to protect his son. That's how important Ivan was to him. And that betrayal, it would eventually start the war between the Sinaloa cartel and the Beltran Leyva organization, a conflict that cost hundreds of lives. In 2008, Ivan is found guilty of money laundering and sentenced to 5 years. But he successfully appeals the verdict and walks free that same year. A federal judge ruled there was no proof his money came from drugs, other than the fact that he was a drug lord's son. 2 judges involved in decisions around that case were later suspended for suspected irregularities. No-cap Mexican justice in the narco era was something else entirely. After his release in 2008, Ivan doesn't slow down. He starts buying ephedrine from Argentina to run methamphetamine labs, reportedly 11 labs across Sinaloa. He's expanding into fentanyl production out of Culiacan. He's building the next generation of the Sinaloa cartel's empire. And all the while, he's on social media, posting photos of assault rifles, stacks of cash, luxury cognac, tigers, actual live tigers that he reportedly owned. Security experts started calling him out for being reckless. One professor of political science at Mexico's National Autonomous University put it plain: a serious narco doesn't do that. But here's what really matters for our story. Around the same time, the period following his 2008 release during the most chaotic and violent years of the Sinaloa cartel's expansion, Ivan Archivaldo married Zulema Aracely Lindoro. Now let me make something clear. Even with all the federal documents, all the reporting, all the Border Patrol records, nobody has officially confirmed whether they ever had a formal legal wedding. U.S. Border Patrol documents from 2012 identify her as his spouse, but even the agents noted it was unclear if the couple is, or ever was, legally married. What isn't unclear is that she was his partner, the mother of his children, and deeply embedded in his world. So how does a girl from the Lindoro family of Badiraguato end up with the eldest son of El Chapo? Think about it. Both families are rooted in the same world, the same geography, the same narco culture of Sinaloa. The Lindoro name was already known in those circles because of El Teco, Mario Lindoro LNS. Zulema's father was already a financial operator within that universe. These weren't random connections. In the narco world of Sinaloa, marriages like this aren't accidents. They're alliances. They're strategic. Blood and business intertwined. And the Lindoros, once Zulema married Ivan, they all moved up. Her father became one of Ivan's financial operators. Her brother Mario Alfredo, L7, became a key coordinator of resources and drug trafficking operations. Her sisters married into political and legal circles. One sister, Olga Herrera, married a lawyer connected to the Autonomous University of Sinaloa. Another sister, Lydia, allegedly held a position on the payroll of Sinaloa state government. The Lindoros, through Zulema's marriage, became one of the most deeply embedded support structures in all of Los Chapitos' operation. But being embedded in that world meant everything that came with it, including the violence, the betrayal, and the fear. Let's talk about what Zulema's life actually looked like, because from the outside, it could look like the narco luxury you see in the shows. Private jets, designer clothes, armed guards, mansions in the nicest zip codes in Zapopan. And yeah, some of that was real. The Lindoro family wasn't living in poverty. Federal agents who raided residences connected to her father and brother found luxury vehicles, SUVs, cash, weapons, and communications equipment. These people were living well. But luxury in the narco world comes with a price that never stops collecting. November 19th, 2012. This is the first time Zulema's name hits the international news. She's 22 years old. She's traveling in a car on a California highway south of Los Angeles with her newborn infant. She gets stopped at the Border Patrol checkpoint in San Clemente. A fingerprint check immediately comes back with a red flag. Her U.S. student visa had been revoked back in March of that year. The reason cited? Suspected ties to the family of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. When agents search the system further, they find her listed in Border Patrol documents as the spouse of Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, the man whose father, the United States, had been hunting for years. Zulema didn't acknowledge the relationship. She didn't say a word about the Guzman family. In that world, you learn real fast, silence is survival. The agents noted there was no evidence she was personally involved in drug trafficking. She had her baby. She was released on humanitarian grounds, given a date to appear before an immigration judge, and ordered to stay. She didn't. Within a couple of days, she voluntarily returned to Tijuana, Mexico. Just months earlier, in May 2012, the U.S. Treasury Department had officially placed Ivan Archivaldo on the Kingpin Act list. His assets in the United States were frozen. His name was now on a federal designation that put him in the same category as the most dangerous drug traffickers in the world. His partner was caught crossing the border with their baby. Whatever sense of safety and protection that came with his name, the U.S. government was making it clear it didn't apply north of the border. But here's what we need to really sit with for a second. This is 2012. Zulema is 22. She has a newborn, and the man she's tied to, the father of her child, is running meth labs, trafficking cocaine, and building a fentanyl empire. He has rivals who want him dead. He has enemies inside his own organization who are watching for weakness. And now the US government has formally declared him a narco kingpin. What kind of life does that create for the woman at home? Sources close to the narco world say Ivan kept Zulema largely in the background intentionally, unlike some cartel figures who paraded their wives openly. Ivan kept her away from the spotlight. Borderland Beat and other outlets that track narco social media noted that their relationship has only been revealed through social media, as both maintain a low profile. But low profile isn't the same as safe, and Zulema's story makes that brutally clear. Because in that same period, 2012 through 2016, the Sinaloa cartel is going through its most violent internal restructuring in history. El Chapo is in prison again by 2014, then he escapes again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel dug directly under his prison cell, a tunnel with lighting, ventilation, a motorcycle rail system. The audacity of that man was something else. Then he's caught again in 2016, then extradited to the United States in January 2017. During all of this, while her partner is navigating the most dangerous years of the Sinaloa cartel's modern existence, Zulema is raising at least 2 children. She is living in the highest security residential areas of Zapopan, surrounded by people whose loyalty she can never be fully certain of. She knows that any mistake, any leak, any wrong move could bring the government to her door, or worse, bring a rival cartel. And here's where it gets real. While Zulema was holding things together at home, Ivan was living a very different kind of life. On the outside, Borderland Beat documented at least 7 women as alleged lovers and partners of Ivan Archivaldo over the years. 7 women named in those reports include Iris Felix, Citlali Morgan, Vanessa Garola, Priscilla Esquera, Esmeralda Beltran, and Jessica Luna. Some of these women reportedly used their connection to Ivan to raise their own profiles in narco-social circles. One woman named Dulce Arias allegedly parlayed her relationship with Ivan into other narco romances, eventually moving on to a relationship with another cartel figure known as El Chato. Reports estimate that Ivan has somewhere between 7 and 20 children. 7 to 20, that range alone tells you how chaotic and uncontrolled his personal life was. Now, Zulema is identified as his formal primary partner, the one U.S. federal documents acknowledge, the one whose father and brother eventually became integral parts of his cartel operation. But formal partner in the narco world doesn't mean faithful partner. It doesn't mean protected. It means you're at the center of something much bigger than yourself, and you don't always get a say in how that goes. The violence those around her were exposed to was not abstract. U.S. indictments against the Chapitos allege that Ivan and his brothers tortured rival drug traffickers, including through electrocution, and even fed some of their victims, dead and alive, to tigers belonging to Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar and Jesus Alfredo Guzmán Salazar. They ran hitmen who were ordered to demolish unsupportive businesses, capture territory, intimidate civilians, and attack law enforcement. This is the world Zulema's children were being born into. This is the air they breathed. Now, August 2016, and this is the moment that would shake the entire narco world and put Zulema's life in a different kind of danger than anything before. It's Ivan's birthday, August 15th. He and his brother Jesus Alfredo are in Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco. For days they've been living it up in the tourist city, rolling through town in a convoy of all-white luxury vehicles, a Cadillac Escalade, a Dodge Challenger, an armored Land Rover, bottles of premium liquor, their guards, their people, all of it, radiating power, invincibility. That night, they gathered at Leche, one of the most upscale restaurants in Puerto Vallarta. Known for its all-white interior design, Spanish-influenced cuisine, the kind of place where the tablecloths cost more than most people's monthly rent. Shortly after 1 in the morning, 2 SUVs pull up to the restaurant. Out come armed men, moving fast and organized. They storm La Leche. 7 gunmen, according to state prosecutors. They disarm Ivan's security detail without firing a single shot. They round up the group. By security camera count, 9 women and 7 men were in the restaurant when this happened. Among them were Ivan, Jesus Alfredo, and their older brother Cesar, the legitimate architect who had managed to stay out of the family business. They were all taken, kidnapped, in broad daylight, in the middle of a tourist area in one of Mexico's most famous beach resort cities. The gunmen were reportedly members of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, El Mencho, the most powerful cartel rival to the Sinaloa organization. And what was being attempted wasn't just a kidnapping. According to experts, this was an assassination attempt. The plan was to kill El Chapo's sons and send a message that no one was untouchable anymore. Now imagine being Zulema in that moment. Your partner, the father of your children, has just been snatched off the face of the earth by the most feared rival cartel in Mexico. El Chapo is in prison, locked down under extreme security after his third capture. Communication in that world was already difficult. And now the man whose name was supposed to protect your family is gone. And nobody knows if he's coming back alive. El Chapo, somehow operating from his prison cell, made clear to anyone who would listen, if his sons weren't returned, he was going to have El Mencho's son, Menchito, killed, regardless of the consequences. Blood for blood. El Mayo Zambada, the old-school co-founder of the Sinaloa cartel, a man who survived every war the cartel had fought since the 1980s through diplomacy and precision, stepped in. El Mayo negotiated. He used his decades of relationships and influence to broker a deal. And within days, Ivan and Jesus Alfredo were released. But one of Ivan's bodyguards, Juan Daniel Calvatapia, wasn't as fortunate. His body was found among a group of dead men in Tonala, Jalisco, days after the kidnapping. That moment at Leche changed things. It showed everyone, including Zulema, that being the woman of El Chapito wasn't a shield. It was a target painted on your back. After the Leche kidnapping, Ivan Archivaldo didn't back down. He and his brothers consolidated more power. El Chapo was extradited to the US in January 2017, and that meant Los Chapitos needed to step fully into the role their father had held. Ivan became the face of the Chapitos faction. He expanded fentanyl production in Culiacan. He extended operations into Sonora, Chihuahua, Durango, and Baja California. He became, in the eyes of the DEA and the US Department of State, one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the world. In April 2023, a federal grand jury in the Northern District of Illinois unsealed a sweeping indictment against all four Chapito brothers: Ivan Archivaldo, Jesus Alfredo, Ovidio, and Joaquin. The charges included running a continuing criminal enterprise, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and money laundering. The indictment stated plainly that the Chapitos have stated to associates that the Sinaloa cartel seeks to flood the United States with fentanyl in order to supply streets of junkies. They allegedly mixed fentanyl into other drugs, heroin, cocaine, counterfeit prescription pills, to create addiction in users who didn't even know they were taking it. This was the man Zulema was tied to, and the consequences for her family started arriving. December 22, 2025. Federal forces from Mexico's security cabinet, the Army, and the Federal Prosecutor's Office moved simultaneously on two exclusive residential addresses in Zapopan, Jalisco, one of the wealthiest areas of the country. And they pull out two men who had been hiding in plain sight. Mario Lindoro Elanese, El Niño, Zulema's father, 69 years old, the patriarch of the Lindoro family. Formerly identified by prosecutors as a financial operator and logistics manager for Ivan Archivaldo's faction of the Sinaloa cartel. And Mario Alfredo Lindoro Navidad, L7, Zulema's brother, 44 years old, identified as a coordinator of drug trafficking operations and resource administrator for Los Chapitos, charged with possession of methamphetamine, fentanyl, and firearms of the type reserved exclusively for the Mexican Armed Forces, meaning military-grade weaponry. Also charged with money laundering. When agents went through the residences, here's what they found: 7 bags of controlled substances, 4 short-barreled firearms, ammunition and extended magazines, 2 luxury SUVs, a high-end sports car, a motorcycle, telecommunications equipment, and cash. These weren't street-level dealers. These were sophisticated operators living at the top of the food chain, until they weren't. A federal judge formally linked both men to criminal proceedings and ordered them held in preventive detention. They were transferred to the maximum security Federal Social Reaptation Center at El Altiplano, the same type of facility where El Chapo himself had been held before his escapes. Eventually, both men sought amparo, a form of constitutional protection to prevent their extradition to the United States. In early 2026, a federal judge suspended their extradition proceedings while the petition was evaluated. As of this recording, both Zulema's father and her brother remain imprisoned at El Altiplano, fighting to avoid being handed over to American prosecutors. Let me put that in human terms. Zulema Aracely Lindoro is a woman who, in a matter of months, saw her father arrested and put in a maximum security federal prison. Her brother arrested on drug and weapons charges. Her partner, the father of her children, living as a fugitive with a $10 million US government bounty on his head, and her own name permanently attached to federal documents on both sides of the border. And she's doing all of this while still being a mother. That doesn't get talked about enough. The children in these situations. The kids who were born into a world they never chose. The indictment says what it says. The court documents say what they say. But somewhere in all of this, there are children who grow up knowing that their grandfather is in El Altiplano, that their uncle is in prison, that their father is one of the most wanted men in Mexico, that their mother's student visa was revoked because of who she loved. The narco culture romanticizes this life constantly. The Instagram pages, the TikToks, the gold-plated weapons, and the designer fits, and the corridos about loyalty and power. But this is what that life actually produces. Shattered families, grandparents behind bars, children raised in fear, women who survive by staying invisible. And El7, Zulema's brother Mario Alfredo, had his own corrido, a song called La Oportunidad by the banda group La Ventaja, which portrays him as the central figure in the family enterprise of drug trafficking. That corrido now plays as the background music to his mugshot and his prison cell. So, what does the story of Zulema Aracely Lindoro tell us? For real, it tells us that in the narco world, women are rarely just bystanders. They are daughters of capos, sisters of operators, mothers of cartel heirs. Their marriages are alliances, their silence is strategic, their suffering is mostly invisible. Zulema didn't choose to be born a Lindoro any more than Ivan chose to be born a Guzman, but both of them were shaped by those last names before they were old enough to make real choices. The difference is that Ivan became one of the most powerful criminals in the world, with resources, armies, and tunnels beneath the earth. Zulema became the woman who had to cross into California with a newborn in her arms and stay quiet when they fingerprinted her. The Lindoro family is a case study in how narco power works. The patriarch managed the money, the son ran the operations, the daughter provided the blood connection, the family link, the social bond that tied the Lindoros to the Guzmans. Each of them played a role. Not all of them chose it willingly. One of Zulema's sisters married a lawyer connected to the University of Sinaloa, a political and academic institution. Another sister reportedly held a government position. That's how these families operate. You spread your presence into every layer of society: law, politics, business, narco, marriage. You create a web so dense that pulling one thread affects everything. And Ivan, as of right now, he is still at large. Still a fugitive, still the most wanted narco in Mexico. His brothers Ovidio and Joaquin are in US federal custody. Elmayo Zambada was arrested in July 2024. Ivan is, for all practical purposes, the last man standing at the top of the Sinaloa cartel's most powerful faction. Reports from as recently as early 2025 say that Ivan Archivaldo is terrified, experiencing what sources describe as continuous nervous breakdowns over the escalating pressure from the Mexican government and US federal forces. The man who fed rivals to his tigers. The man who kidnapped federal agents and had them tortured at ranches in Navolato. The man whose birthday party turned into a kidnapping by CJNG gunmen. That man is now the hunted one. And Zulema, the honest truth is, we don't know exactly where she fits into all of this right now. She maintains one of the lowest profiles of any woman connected to Los Chapitos. Since the 2012 border arrest, her name has appeared in federal documents and investigative reports, but she has not been publicly charged with any crime. U.S. Border Patrol explicitly noted back in 2012 that there was no evidence to suggest Lindoro was involved in the drug trade. As of the latest reporting, she is not listed as a fugitive or an indicted party in the U.S. Federal cases against Los Chapitos. But her world is collapsing around her in slow motion. Her father and her brother are in maximum security prison. Her partner is a fugitive. Her children are growing up under the shadow of one of the most scrutinized crime families in the history of the Western Hemisphere. And she is largely invisible in all of it, which, in that world, is probably both the goal and the consequence. The narco world asks a lot of women. It asks them to stay quiet while the men make the decisions. It asks them to raise the children while their partners disappear for weeks at a time, sometimes into rival territory, sometimes into the arms of other women. It asks them to carry the family name without the power that comes with it. And when things go wrong, as they always eventually do, it asks them to face the aftermath alone. That's what really went down with Zulema Aracely Lindoro Navidad. Not the luxury, not the glamour, not the corridos playing in the background. The reality of being born with the wrong last name in the wrong part of Sinaloa, of falling into the orbit of El Chapo's eldest son, of watching your own father get walked out of a mansion in Zapopan in handcuffs by federal soldiers, of knowing your brother is in El Altiplano. No cap. That's a weight most of us will never understand. The Lindoros built an empire in the shadows. The Guzmans built one in plain sight. And somewhere in between those two worlds, Zulema has been living a life that most people never see, and probably never should. Stay safe out there. And if you learned something today, drop a comment, share this video, because these are the stories that get buried, and they deserve to be told.